Welcome to Wander Paws Down Under. I'm Dan.
I'm Anita.
And together we're travelling around Australia with our dog Wally, our cat Paprika, our off-road caravan, and our trusty Toto Hilux.
And we're here to bring you some pet travelling tips on the road. And today we have a new kind of episode again. This time it's a little bit different. Navigating Australian seasons with pets.
So we're going to talk about the main considerations when determining where you end up and the order in which you end up there. Specifically when you're doing your Australian lap or partial Australian lap with your pets. We're also going to talk about the factors such as travel direction, crowds, costs, weather, be it dry, hot, cold, storms, wind, and our best mate, humidity.
And if you're anything like me, you might not even realise before you set out for your trip that there are so many different weather patterns and, things that you need to consider. I don't know, I just guess I lived in a little bubble and didn't realise that there's all these tropical climates, subtropical climates, obviously the dry deserts, and then you've got your freezing cold, the coastal southern parts of Australia as well. So it's,
We've seen it all, so happy to share our experience.
We've even got snow here, guys. So.
Absolutely. But before you consider anything further, remember to hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. Give us a like, give us a comment. We'd love to hear your feedback. So, should we start with travel direction?
Yeah, I guess.
Clockwise versus anti-clockwise.
Absolutely.
That is the big question. I don't know. I think a lot of people have their ideals, and in particular, when you look at direction, I don't actually think it really matters.
I guess it depends on what time of the year you're starting your trip.
Yep.
And kind of
where you're starting it from.
Yeah, and where you want to start it from and how long you're going to spend in certain places. I guess that's the main thing to consider in terms of direction.
Yep.
For us, our sort of ideas were limited because we were leaving in the cold of winter from Victoria. So we had a very long way to get to any kind of heat. So
very long way.
So that kind of narrowed us down a little bit, didn't it?
Yeah, that's right. And we've also done quite a bit of the southern coast along South Australia, and Western Australia region. And the Nullarbor. So we've done that on a previous trip. So in this time we decided to do something a little bit different. And we actually went kind of more or less express to Flinders Ranges. We did stop at a few wine regions, Mount Gambier, but that was still a really, really cold part of the world. We were talking about nights that are
it was crisp.
Close to zero, very crisp. And as we got further north, we got into the desert, and that wasn't actually any better. Well, it was warmer during the day.
Yeah,
but
exactly. Look, so Dan's been to the desert in the summer, so he'll be a good sort of point of reference for this. But to be honest, I enjoyed being in Central Australia in the winter because the sun was still out every single day. There's not a lot, we didn't have a lot of rain or any of those kind of days in between, no wild weather. And it was beautiful because hot days means plenty of times for hiking, but cold nights, unfortunately.
Yep. And in terms of the map that I've just put up, so the section we're talking about happened from late May basically into mid-June, where we're talking about that Central Australia part.
And another bonus about going to Central Australia in the winter, there's no bugs.
Yep, that's true, especially considering I have been there in summer and it is hectic. So, yeah, look, I mean, May, it was actually the best time of the year to visit Central Australia, so that was kind of the initial overriding logic, because we considered going up the East Coast first, but we also considered the fact that you might be dealing with crowds, but more on that later. So then we went express kind of through the Great Central Road and popped up in Perth. I think it was still quite cool.
A very rainy winter this year, so it was pretty chilly.
Yep, and then over sort of through July and August and September, we made our way all up the WA coast. And it was interesting because when we got to Broome and the Kimberley region, we discovered to our undelight the build-up season had started literally over a month early.
Yeah, it was a month early, so that made it a little bit challenging for us. We were definitely feeling the heat
and humidity. Yeah, it was pretty hectic. And even Wally and Paprika, I don't know if you've ever seen a cat pant, but we've just popped up something on the screen. The cat was literally panting. The dog
really
goes
was.
without saying, but the cat.
Yeah, I know. And that's another thing to consider, guys. The heat is a big problem. Humidity is even worse.
Yeah.
Especially when you're wearing a fur coat.
Yeah, and I've heard even women struggle with the humidity because your hair goes all frizzy
gosh,
and your
yeah.
makeup starts running. And
You're not wearing too much makeup on this trip, I won't lie. But you do struggle a little bit, and make sure you bring lots of light clothing.
Yeah, for sure. So into like October, through the October month, we were up in the top end. So Darwin, Litchfield, Kakadu, all that area. Again, build up was in full swing. We were getting
now the degrees were less, weren't they? Like
36,
the degrees,
37?
Yeah, no, but the degrees were less. I think it was like even 30 some days.
Yeah.
But the amount of humidity within Darwin and that top end region, it was just unbearably hot.
Even at night, like it didn't cool down at night. That's the problem. There was no relief.
No.
Even with our like little portable aircon system, we just made it through.
Yeah, and look, there is less crowds, but now we know why.
Yeah, for sure. So then onwards to Queensland. So was it November, I think? Yeah, November we were in Queensland, far north Queensland. So we decided not to go to Cape York because it was already a little bit too late in the year.
It was getting wet.
It was getting a bit wet. So, but yeah, Queensland was actually, I found in November was actually quite good. Far north Queensland. Yeah.
Pretty nice, actually.
And then basically after that, around December, Christmas, we ended up around the Brisbane region. So we travelled from far north to Brisbane, and the heat and humidity was following us.
Absolutely. I don't know. Yeah, maybe it was just me. I think we're very lucky that we were doing a house sit in Brisbane, because I thought Brisbane was the most humid place that we had been to in a while. So yeah, Brizzy got me pretty good. Every time I left the house, maybe it was because we had aircon and we weren't living outside like this point. And the contrast maybe makes it even worse, but it was friggin' hot around December.
Even like Northern Rivers in the new year and Jan and sort of Feb making our way down the New South Wales coast.
Definitely got more pleasant.
But
it was
still
hot.
Yeah, there's quite a few considerations to think about. And look, I think we took an unconventional route and maybe even an unconventional direction relative to where we were of the year. But there was a bit of method to the madness, and there were actually quite a few pluses. So keep watching.
Stick with us.
Yeah. Before we proceed, I think we should also put up on a map that's been doing the rounds in our social media feeds around the most ideal times to go around the country and where to be. So I popped that up on the screen so you can have a good hard look. Obviously, this is not what we did, but we still had a ball, having a ball.
Yeah, and there's a couple of positives that we're about to talk about.
And the pets are still with us, thankfully.
Yes. So
Go.
I guess like the biggest positives that you might notice if you choose to go unconventional way around Australia is, look, depending on where you go, we were kind of in the shoulder season, so we weren't completely in the off or on season. I think only in southeast Queensland we were there in holiday seasons, so that was a bit different, but the majority of our trip we were just after holidays or just kind of at the end of holidays, so the crowds were less, and that's a really, really big plus for more than one reason. For one, you have a bit more space. For two, the costs are very different.
Yep.
So more on that, Dan? Like, what was the most kind of noticeable? I think the accommodation, really.
Yeah, it was actually the fact that
accommodation, but
it was actually the fact that it's harder to wing because you've got to make bookings in advance if you go at the peak time. And that can really throw a spanner in the works. Like, we did end up in a few situations, like around Exmouth, where it's just not an easy place to wing, and we had to do some grey area camping just outside of town because we just had no choice.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so definitely it's harder to wing it. Still possible, but with pets especially, because not every place is pet friendly. You're limited to the options of accommodation. And those options do tend to fill up pretty quick because there's a lot of people traveling with pets. Yeah,
and in the peak seasons, the caravan parks don't all offer pet-friendly accommodation.
Yeah.
Or they charge extra.
That's like the... I don't know if any resort managers or decision makers are watching, but charging for a pet where the pet cannot use your facilities
and he has to be on leash the whole time.
That is ridiculous, and there is no easier way to piss off your clientele than to offer that. I feel very passionately because we recently made a decision not to stay. But yeah, like they were trying to flog us like $16 extra for the pets.
No, I think it was
way.
even more
Yeah.
in some places. Like,
And-
but like we said, like actually does limit your options as well. So in peak seasons and even some of the shoulder season, it does limit your options for pet friendly accommodations because some of them have little asterisks and you might notice.
Yep.
And that means you have to call them to see if they'll allow pets, at all. Which again, I don't understand. Maybe it's because of kids and dogs, and there's
Yeah.
probably been a few incidences over the years and stuff like that. But unfortunately, that's how it is. It's a big thing. Harder to wing when it's busy. Cost of accommodation and sites are much more expensive.
Yep.
Cost of your tours are more expensive. The crowds, if you're going to go do a tour, you'd rather have a smaller group, wouldn't you? Like, so
Definitely.
shoulder seasons are pretty good for that reason. Because you're kind of getting a little bit of both.
Yep.
But it was still hard for us in Exmouth out of all of the places that we've been.
Yeah, definitely. Also, another little tip that we can give you, it's sort of not 100% related to this topic, but is a good one anyway, is if you are near cities or like major towns, we've found staying in those cities or major towns over the weekend is actually better because when you do go back into nature camping during the week, there's pretty much no people.
Very true.
So that's been a good one we've learnt, especially recently.
True. So let's get back to the weather.
Yeah.
What do you reckon? We should start with heat.
We'll start with heat because that's...
Like dry heat, just
yeah.
regular heat.
So in terms of like with your pets, it's obviously a riskier proposition
Much
to
riskier.
leave them in your caravan, either inside or outside. We see a lot of people tying them up if
Yeah.
there's heat. It's a really obvious one, but it can really creep up on you as well.
Yeah, and even leaving them outside unattended, like, it depends where you are as well. If you're in bush sites and it's a sunny day, you do get reptiles coming out, like your lizards and your snakes,
Yep.
unfortunately. And we've even seen Wally once when we left him at our caravan, outside of the caravan. Thankfully, we were walking back at the time, but he actually ran to sort of catch a goanna, or maybe to run after a goanna, and his lead,
The stake, we've got him in like
had
a
actually
star picket sort of
stopped
thing.
him.
Yeah.
So, look, I personally don't think it's the best idea if you're not around. It's definitely not something that you should do and leave them for the day. In the heat, definitely.
Yep.
Like, it's
Yeah.
just too much.
And-
And the sun moves, guys, which I'm sure you're all aware of. But that means the shade moves. So sometimes it can be, a little bit risky.
Yeah, and that's a particular issue, say, if you're travelling along the Gib. So in Gib, on the Gib River Road, there was no real powered sites available anywhere.
Yeah.
And we were there during build-up. So we were there close to 40 degrees each day, minimum of 27, 28 at night. The place was stinking hot. So, we had to be really careful when we actually left the pets.
Yeah.
And when also
I don't think we
ran
left
our
Wally
big...
at all.
Yeah, we didn't really leave him at all.
No.
But when we ran our big fan, for example, like, even if it was in the shade, that was the only thing that actually allowed us to survive that trip.
Yeah.
Being in the shade and having just enough power to run your
Yeah.
high-speed fans.
Yeah, and that's the good thing about that aircon that Dan just recently reviewed is it does double up as a really strong fan.
Yep.
And we actually used that again today in a similar situation where it was just a little bit hotter than usual. We needed to leave the pets for a little bit to go and do something that we needed to do, and it just completely gave them,
Yep.
a bit of relief. So, yeah, look, heat's an obvious one. Shade is the key, but the problem is then you don't get solar.
Yeah.
So you need to work it out depending on, where you're staying, if you're in nature. But if you're able to move the caravan into some shade whilst you're kind of going away, I mean, you could leave them for a little bit, but again,
Yep.
it's no different really to leaving them in a car if it's a really, 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 really hot day.
Yeah. And another little way in which we've managed heat, Gib River Road is a great example of it, is we actually took our babies to the swim holes and the watering holes and selected water and swim holes that were pet friendly so that we could actually take them.
Thankfully
And
on
that-
the Gib there's heaps.
Yeah, and that actually worked really well because everyone can cool off. Typically a fresh watering hole is a lot cooler than the ambient air temperature. So everyone can cool off, the dog can have a drink, even the cat loved it. He was a bit of an adventure cat
Yeah, absolutely.
on the Gib, and it's good for you as well. So yeah, I guess try and be near a water source if you can.
Try and get powered sites if you can, so that you can crank the aircon for
Yep.
the pets. Because when we were doing that, we actually didn't feel uncomfortable to leave them.
Yep.
Because if you're at a powered site, you know that it's not going to get knocked out or nothing's going to go wrong. So yeah, it's a little bit more comforting. So kind of think about that. Like if you're going to be in the real heat, like 40-degree type heat, we're talking maybe like even high 30s.
Yep.
You got to think about where you're leaving your caravan, whether it's possible to take the pets. Other thing you have to think about is activities with the pets, what kind of pressure that's putting on them.
Or you could just try and avoid those parts of Australia when they are those temperatures, which may not be possible.
We met other people with their dogs at the same time that we did, and it was unseasonably hot. So unfortunate for us that we did get like unseasonable weather the whole year. But with everything going on, climate change or whatever you believe in doesn't matter. But the reality is that the weather is changing everywhere. So you do have to be a little bit more cautious.
Yeah, and nimble as well, because if it's just too hot, like, get a move on, get out of there. Like, we considered it a number of times in the top end, and we actually cut our Darwin trip short by about 2 weeks, because it was just, no one could just handle it.
No. No long walks with the dog. No cat backpack for the cat.
No cat backpack. So we got heat, now let's swing it to cold. Let's talk about the cold. The very first part of our trip. We actually haven't had cold for about 6 months, and we're just starting to get like the first inklings of it, and we're like, nah.
To be honest, for the pets, it's actually better. Like, unless you're like leaving them outside in the snow or something like that. If they're in your caravan, it's better. They know how to get warm. I mean, leave them some blankies, give them a nice cozy spot on the bed.
Put your diesel heater on.
Yeah, look, the diesel heater is another great one if you're lucky enough to have one. But yeah, look, it's easy. You do have issues. You have to still keep the pets warm. They need some, maybe a little clothing. Maybe they've got jumpers. Maybe you've got some blankies. Whatever. So you just have to be a bit more prepared. But it is actually a lot better when it comes to pets for hikes and everything.
Yeah, it's a lot better for them. I don't know if it's much better for us, because trying to get your bum out of bed when it's like freezing cold. Yeah, and it's dark as well.
And look, we've got a pop top, so you do feel the weather.
Yeah.
I don't know if anyone else that's watching has a pop top. Just keep in mind that it's not quite a tent, but it's not quite a caravan. So you definitely feel the weather more than someone in a caravan, a lot less than someone in a tent, but cold seeps in, heat seeps in.
Yeah. And yeah, I guess the thing that's really, really saved us in the cold, other than the clothing that we wear, is actually having a diesel heater in our caravan.
Yeah, we've been lucky.
Guys, if you are considering putting one in and you're going to be in those southern states, it is worth every single penny.
We thought we'd never needed one.
We laughed at the guy that sold us this caravan, because we were like, yeah, we're going to be up north. 6 weeks we froze. The first 6 weeks of our trip, we froze.
That heater on was every single day.
Every day, every night.
Yeah.
Take the time, spend the money, put it in. Trust me, you will not regret it. When you are in the Alpine region and it's 0 degrees,
agree.
You want that on. Actually, even in Central Australia it was 0, so yeah.
It was perfect having that on. And we even did a swag a couple of nights, and it was so weird. Like, you'd get the freezing cold nights and the hot days, so you just end up like with all of the condensation in your face the whole time. But yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah, so I guess it sounds like, because we're not ranting and raving about the cold as much as the heat, it sounds like the cold is actually better.
Yeah, I think so. Like, if you're not in a tent, it's definitely
easier.
Bit better. If we're talking about pets in particular as well, for them walking and everything, it's much easier.
Yeah. So maybe let's talk about wind. And I don't know if the pets really give two hoots about wind, but we do. And you will too, if you spend enough time in a windy place.
Does, and Wally does, because when they hear the loud noises, they get a bit spooked sometimes. I remember Wally barked at the wind the other day.
He did, yeah. So, look, wind quite obviously is a regular consideration when you're on the coast, and you need to make sure that you secure your stuff. But we've found that wind is actually more of an ally than a hindrance, particularly where it's warm climate. So if there's a warm climate, like for example in Caravanning, it was quite warm but dry, and once that wind picked up in the afternoon, blew straight through the caravan, cooled the place down by a good 5-6 degrees.
If there was a breeze, we could literally leave the pets or, like be inside the caravan without having all of those, issues that we just spoke about on the other section. So yeah, like a breeze is great. It is also a good thing for bugs.
True.
Yeah, like you tend to know if there's a hot day.
Especially in Queensland.
If it's a hot day but there's a breeze, there is less bugs. Yeah, we've noticed. So.
That's true. Yeah. The sandflies and midges seem to magically disappear.
Except for at that one place.
And they don't appear on your skin. But yeah, look, wind can be an ally, but it can also be quite dangerous, particularly if you are leaving your pets, say, outside, tied up to your caravan, or if you're travelling in like a tent and you leave them in your tent. branches.
It's crazy how much, yeah, it's crazy how much the caravan can move as well. So make sure you're putting down your legs, batting down all of the...
Putting down your legs. I generally think they walk on legs, don't
I mean, the caravan legs, because, you know, we were a bit lazy with that when we first started, and a few windy nights, the caravan's really moving. I'm like, okay, now I understand why we put that on there. So the caravan legs are good. When you're putting out your awnings and stuff like that, just making sure that everything's really secure.
Yep.
Flappers and everything.
And unfortunately, it's not actually really easy to predict where in Australia you're going to cop wind at what time of year. I think if you're on the coast, you're pretty much guaranteed, unless you're up in the tropics, you're pretty much guaranteed that there's going to be a breeze most days, if not wind. I think maybe you can also check where the storm seasons are in the particular parts of Australia where you're going, because wind and storms tends to sometimes go together.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think for us, it wasn't really a consideration. It was just something that we had to deal with at the time in each location. It wasn't really a driver of which direction we go in or where we end up. It was more of a secondary bonus round. Yeah. Storms.
Yeah, so heavy rain, you'll definitely encounter this on your journey at some point. Most likely it will be really annoying.
Yeah.
Especially if you've got a dog like Wally, who really loves to get dirty, smelly and muddy. So yeah, there's a few things that might be the same for you depending on your type of pooch, but every time you step out of the caravan you're gonna get dirty, and you're living in such a small space with depending on your setup, small space with animals and your dirty feet and your dirty shoes and your wet bodies and everything, so it just gets really messy and dirty really
You just
fast.
got to turn off that part of your brain that gets stressed about mess and dirt and muck everywhere.
Yeah.
That has to be turned off. You'll not survive the trip otherwise.
Yeah. So for the dog, we recommend like taking, his bed that might be off the ground if you're going to have him outside under the awning or whatever you're going to do. Off the ground, then at least he's not going to get drenched. It's okay, not a problem. Definitely have an awning of some kind, because that's literally, if you do want to spend any time outside and not be stuck inside your tent or caravan or whatever it is, like having like another gazebo or a awning that you can kind of sit under, depending on how crazy the rain can get, because we've been in some serious rain. That's where rain and wind come together, and it can be quite an issue.
Also, another thing that has actually been a lot of value is having an outdoor tap on your caravan that you can run from your water tanks. So what we do is when Wally gets muddy, we don't generally let him in directly into the caravan. We take him to the back of the van, connect our little shower, and give him a nice cold shower wash down.
That's a good tip, to bring like a little shower head with you.
I think that thing cost us about $400 to install, but it's been super valuable, particularly if you want to have a shower yourself. Like if you just come from the beach and there's no public showers around, give yourself a spray, not just the dog.
But it's good for him, and then you can also fill up the water bottle easily as well, so it's good.
Insects always come out when there's heavy rain and moisture.
Heavy rain means leeches in a lot of the rainforest in New South Wales and Queensland and probably Victoria, and
not just leeches when you do a hike, leeches in your campsite. That's the worst, where you can't even be comfortable sitting out there. Yeah.
And leeches on me means leeches on Wally.
Yeah.
Paprika is yet to have a leech, thank God, but Wally, like, he's got a light coloured fur. He has looked like someone shot him multiple times, because I was like, oh my God, he's bleeding from everywhere.
From the nose, from the lip, from the...
Poor thing. And honestly, you don't even know it's happened. It's like 2 seconds. You've taken him for a walk from here to there. Next minute, he looks fine, and then give it 10 minutes and there's wounds all over him, including on us. So in the rainforests, tropical rain, muddy floor, usually pretty muddy walks, rivers, waterfalls.
It's a pretty good incentive to try and avoid the tropics in and around wet season, but if you're like us and you kind of got the shoulder seasons up there, that can still bring about plenty of lovely insects and also challenges for you. So I would say heavy rain and storms is a really, really important consideration, because that can ruin entire chunks of your trip. Well, not ruin, but it can basically, like, if you can't do any activities, if you're just sitting there and you can't do much other than watch Netflix, it's also maybe not the best way to spend your time.
Yeah, and look, going anywhere in the wet season is not going to be fun because you're subject to flooding, subject to, you know...
Bogging.
It's actually just pointless.
Yeah.
A lot of national parks are closed.
Yeah, north.
Yeah, like...
Yeah.
I mean, it's good to support communities in all seasons, but if you're actually thinking of doing nature stuff and camping with the van, it's probably not the right time of the year.
Yep. Solar issues.
Yeah, obviously.
Yeah, so
there's no sunshine.
you won't get much sunshine.
It is still hot though in the north, like in the rainy season. But also you have to consider as well with the the wet season, or the shoulder season is actually probably better, because the shoulder season means that you will see waterfalls with actually water coming out.
That's
of them.
true.
So we've had a couple of experiences with this on the opposite sort of sides of the story. When we were in Western Australia, northern parts, and doing the Gib, we did get to see a lot of waterfalls on the Gib, but they were trickles.
Yeah.
Because we were there at the very end of the dry season.
And the watering holes that were still open, some of them were quite low on water, and it was quite warm water, so there was the issue of parasites and stuff. So we didn't swim necessarily in every single place which we encountered, but you can still do it.
Yeah.
Just, keep in mind, I think if you're going to that other end of the shoulder season, after the dry rather, then things can get a little sparse.
Yeah.
But I guess in far north Queensland, we were there before the rains hit, and the waterfalls were abundant.
Yeah. So look, it's a bit of a hard one because we have seen such variance in, the weather. It's not standard as it might have used to be. But yeah, to see after heavy rains in Queensland, some of the waterfalls, it's actually a blessing.
Yeah,
it was
it's
so beautiful. So yes, there were leeches. Yes, some of the water levels in the, water crossings and stuff might have been a little bit higher. So as long as your rig is capable to do it, you might be able to get through. But yeah, the waterfalls are abundant. The water was flowing. So look, there's so much beauty. This is why I think the main season that people go is, just after the wet season, because then you kind of get a bit of everything. And that's why it is one of the more popular kind of times of the year to go travelling in the northern parts of Australia.
Yeah, 100%, because I think May's considered one of the better months to go, say, to the Gib, but May's also a great time and the best time to go to Central Australia.
Yeah.
And it's also a pretty good time, I've heard, to go up to like Kagari and up that way. So look, there's just so many options. There's no right or wrong answer here.
Exactly. This is where you're gonna have to just decide what's your highest priority.
Decide and run with it, and don't look back, because like it can be a little bit corrosive to look back and go, oh, I wish I did that. This is your experience. This is your reality now. Go it, enjoy it. It's got pluses, it's got minuses. Even if it's wet, it's fine. It's doable.
But I definitely wouldn't recommend going anywhere in the wet season unless you're flying and staying in a hotel, because to be honest, I mean, unless you live nearby, but more for your pets, for yourself, it's just not very safe to travel across some of those places, and most of the places are closed at that time of the year. So definitely check your national parks as well that you want to go to, and check that they are open at the time you want to go, because we did experience that in a couple of places where it was actually just at the end of the dry season. They had already closed off multiple water holes. So the dry season, we're kind of leading into the dry season, talking about it a couple of times now. So the dry season, that's one of the big concerns, is like national parks do close locations in the dry season
if it's super hot.
But and it's the same in the wet season.
But in the dry season, say up north, like in the cooler months, then of course they're all open. So dry doesn't necessarily have to have anything to do with heat. That's actually one that I think
sorry, I just realized that I've confused that in the way it comes across. But
I love it how you've been traveling for almost a year and you're still confusing it.
No, because
precipitation versus temperature.
I just mean it's the dry season versus the wet season, but I'm talking about obviously the climates where it is tropical. And dry might not mean it's hot. Actually, it's cold in the dry season.
It could be cold and dry. But look, with dry, quite obviously, if it's dry, there's going to be less water. If you can't get water from natural sources, which most people don't, you're not going to necessarily suck water out every creek that you find, but it can also be harder to obtain it on the road, particularly in the more remote parts of Western Australia. The biggest consideration you have
Water sources.
for keeping yourself and your pets alive is water.
Yeah.
And carrying enough water. And having
Don't
enough
let
water...
them drink from those little creeks when they're low like that.
Yeah, and also having enough water that if you have a little bit of a mishap, like we did on the Great Central Road, where our water pipe got pierced and we drained our tanks in our caravan, we still had water in jerry cans, which sustained us for a couple of days. Yeah, so water's a big one. Dry is an important one. I think it's reasonably clear-cut in Australia where the dry seasons are, up north during the winter months, and then, down south it kind of rains all the time in a way, so it's harder to predict dry versus wet, but yeah, up north it's...
But it's definitely easier the dry season if you're talking about which months are considered like June.
Yeah, May up north,
July.
like May, June, July,
August.
So like
the kind of in the middle of the dry season is really the optimum time for traveling. But like we said, we did it at the end of the dry season, and there was benefits from that, and there was negatives.
Yeah.
But mostly, to be honest, it was all good.
Yep, definitely. And also, it tends to be like up north in the dry months. That's where you get the crowds and the costs. So
in the
you gain one
dry
thing
month-
and then you
dry
lose
months.
a few other things. That's a recurring theme here.
Yeah, peak season.
Maybe we'll end it with humidity, our best friend for many, many months now.
It doesn't. I
Humidity.
feel like everywhere in Australia is humid now. I used to think like I only knew Melbourne and Perth climates, and I thought never ever felt humidity really. And then all of a sudden, it's like every single place after that is just humid.
I think
like,
it's just this time of year.
it's just humid everywhere.
Yeah.
I think so anyway.
Well, the problem with humidity is, like in isolation, it might be bearable if the temperatures are low enough, but paired with heat, it can be downright dangerous, both to you and in particular your pets, because they really, really struggle to cool down when it's humid.
And it's funny because you think like dogs obviously struggle to cool their bodies down, and they have, they pant. But like we said, we've seen
Cats pant as
Paprika.
well.
We've seen Paprika panting because he also struggles. So look, it's pretty straightforward, but your body is not cooling down and neither is theirs. So if you're feeling hot, you need to double that supply of water, because if you're thirsty, they're thirsty. I'm sure that's just general knowledge, but if you haven't been in the humid climate before, you do really, 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 really feel like you're literally losing the whole entire body water, it feels like.
Yeah, that's true. And
So-
in particular for your pets, it's just, like this is one that we can't
Don't
emphasize
exercise
enough.
them in that weather.
Yeah, don't exercise. No late night.
Late night?
middle of the day walks. Keep them.
Yeah,
keep
evening.
them to evening and early morning. But yeah, look, if you do want to avoid humidity, obviously those.
Wally's quite thirsty right now. I can
Wally's
hear.
thirsty. In the northern sort of regions of Australia, just avoid obviously the build-up season and the wet season. Those seasons are not always clear-cut these days. Clearly, as we found out, it came over a month early. But yeah, with that one, all you can do is really avoid. But I feel like it'll kind of catch up to you wherever you are. If you're north of Sydney or like north of Perth, in those summer months, you'll feel it.
Yeah, absolutely.
You'll feel it.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, we felt it the whole time.
We're still feeling it. I'm sweating as we
sweating,
speak.
my God, a sweaty lip. So like we felt it. So it's just a matter of, if you are traveling with your pets, maybe to think ahead as to where you're going to be staying.
Yep.
And ensuring that you have the proper means to sort of get
Cool.
through. Yeah, get cool or warm yourselves.
Or heat, yeah.
But mostly cool down, because it really does affect the pets a lot more. And choosing your accommodation based on the weather. Look, sometimes we're literally, I think Bomb is like one of the first apps on our phones right now, because every day we're just checking the weather, and sometimes we've actually changed our direction of what we were going to do based on the weather. Like if it's going to be pouring with rain all week, why go into the rainforest where there's trees and there's things that are going to...
Why?
Well, look...
That is exactly what we just did, and we almost slid down a muddy mountain.
Yeah, exactly. And don't get me wrong, like it's probably nice to have a couple of rainy days in the rainforest from time to time, but if it's going to be raining, you're going to have problems.
Yep.
We've fallen off the bloody cliff almost. Not
We had
quite.
to do our first recovery.
Yeah.
In the muddy rainforest.
Yeah, and then there was leeches and other things trying to attack us. So look, yeah, like it's common sense, but like looking through that weather and going, okay, maybe I'll stick to the coast this week.
Yeah.
Depending on where you are, obviously that's going to be easier than
And how long you've got as well.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So, look, the weather is spontaneous. We can't really tell you exactly where it's going to be and what's going to happen. There are months and, some sort of rhyme and reason to how it all works. But
study the maps, study the charts, do your homework, get your
Yeah.
geography books out. It is definitely something worth investing some time into, because it could mean the difference between having an amazing trip and having a slightly less amazing
But
trip.
also in our own experience, like, we did go against the grain and we had a really great time.
Yep.
And we ended up, one or two places we probably think, it would have been nicer to go at a different time of the year. But the majority of the time, with the right planning, with the right resources to look after our babies.
And we had it to
loved
ourselves a lot of the time as well, which is
we pretty
made
much had
this
the
very
whole entire
special.
Gibb River Road to ourselves.
Yep.
And it was awesome.
Yeah. So, I'm sure we've thrown a very, very great spanner into your works. You can thank us in the comments if you wish.
Kind of just been yarning, but at the same time,
there is some method to the madness.
I hope it spins like your wheels and gets you thinking.
Yeah, that's the main thing. Anyway, let us know what you thought about the episode. We'd love to hear your feedback. Any other tips that you'd like us to give, please just reach out. So thanks for watching another episode of Wonder Paws. We'll catch you later.